Essentially what NIHOWDY is a platform where customers can save money on prescription costs. And on every purchase, they can actually earn drug rebates. And the drug rebates, they actually come in the form of Bitcoin.
Building a startup is difficult. This is probably something that's obvious if you've ever tried. Taking a product or service from an idea all the way to market is really difficult. And when you layer on top Bitcoin, it can become even more difficult, as sometimes investors and partners just maybe won't take you seriously. And these are some of the trials and tribulations that are shared on this episode with my guest, James. James has founded NIHOWDY. What is NIHOWDY? NIHOWDY pays people in Bitcoin when they buy prescription drugs, especially when they save money on buying prescription drugs. If you've ever bought prescription drugs in the US, maybe you've used something called GoodRx. GoodRx essentially allows people to get discounts on prescription drugs. And there's a little amount, as James calls out, somewhere between 12 to 15%, that they actually make off every single sale when someone uses GoodRx. And what NIHOWDY does is it takes that profit margin and it shares it back with the customer. And how does it do it? It shares it in Bitcoin. Why? Because Bitcoin is a really great way to share micropayments. James will dive more into this on this episode, but I'm super excited to share this episode with you because especially if you're in the United States, this is a very good use case of something that most people will probably be able to take advantage of. Because as you go out to buy your prescription drug and you get your discount, you can now get paid back some of the money that has been saved in Bitcoin. So let's dive into the episode. Let's hear from James and let's learn about NIHOWDY, a Bitcoin healthcare startup. I'm Jarrett Carpenter, and this is More Than Blockchain. James, welcome to More Than Blockchain. How are you?
Pretty good. How are you, dude?
I'm doing well. And for everyone listening, when I have guests on, there's normally a 5-minute period where we're just talking, we're catching up, and then I press play. But I think we've been talking now closer to 10 to 12. And I think it was only right for us to finally put this on wax, as they would say. So anyway, James, thank you so much for hopping on. You and I met on Twitter and I saw your Bitcoin startup. Is it okay if I call it a Bitcoin? I feel like it's a Bitcoin startup.
Sure, you can say that.
Is that demeaning? Is it bringing it down?
No, it's I don't even know how to explain the startup sometimes to a lot of people.
Okay, good. Because I wasn't trying to, because it's like a company that's just starting and it's related to Bitcoin. So I feel like Bitcoin startup was appropriate, but
sure.
I don't know. Sometimes people, I feel like in the Web3 space, they get really sensitive if I call something a startup. Have you run into that?
No, NIHOWDY basically, it's sort of fintech, it's healthcare, and then there's crypto. It's an amalgamation of all three industries. So it depends on who I talk to, but more geared towards the cryptocurrency and the Web3 community. Essentially what NIHOWDY is a platform where customers can save money on prescription costs. And on every purchase, they can actually earn drug rebates. And the drug rebates, they actually come in the form of Bitcoin. So what's really cool about our startup is that no one in the industry right now gives drug rebates back to customers. Drug rebates happen to benefit everyone in the industry, or at least in the pharmaceutical industry, but it never goes back to customers or consumers like you and me. And the reason I know this is because I used to own a ton of pharmacies. Every month I would get a rebate check in the mail from all these different manufacturers and be for hundreds of thousands of dollars. It was great. But unfortunately, this doesn't get passed back to the consumer who has to pay for medications out of pocket. We're geared more for the uninsured and underinsured individuals. The moving trend going forward, you're going to see a lot of Medicaid beneficiaries start to lose coverage or see reduced coverage. People who are on Medicare, those are for people who are 65 and older, are probably going to be covered by, the federal government. But all the people in the middle who are working class, who have to, support themselves, their family, earn bills, these are more typically the ones who are underinsured or uninsured. They may or may not have coverage from their employer, and that sort of sucks. So you're going to start seeing this trend, going in the future where a lot of people will have to decide, whether to buy medications or not, and they have to buy it at the cheapest cost and cheapest price. Our medications, if you go to any competitor, our medications are comparable and competitive in pricing, but they just don't offer drug rebates back in return. Sort of why, sorry, I'm being really pedantic, but this is stuff I find really interesting. But sort of why I settled on, Bitcoin as as a reward or a rebate back to our customers is really comes down to the transaction fees. If I'm a business and I wanted to just give you, like, say you buy a $10 drug, I give you 30 cents back on that. How am I going to send that to you? It costs me 60 cents to mail something. And, I still have to hire accounts payable team. Someone calls, and says, I didn't get my 30-cent check. We'll have to hire someone to, be on the phone with you. If I were to Venmo you, it'd cost the business anywhere from a quarter to $1.50. So this idea just out of water, it sort of just doesn't work. But with Bitcoin, if you properly batch the transactions on a layer 2 network, I mean, you're looking at what, 1,000th% in transaction fees. I find that to be super amazing. But what's really cool is that with Bitcoin, I really believe there's some sort of value sort of principle here. And if we were to give 30 cents of Bitcoin to, say, an everyday customer who needs medications, and that 30 cents somehow appreciates to what, $30 one day, that might be a way of, solving out of pocket prescription costs, or at least reducing it. And I don't think anyone's really thought outside the box, in applying this sort of approach. When I first found out about Bitcoin, it was like maybe 2008, 2009. I didn't really understand what Bitcoin was. I just remember in college, a lot of people would use Bitcoin to purchase, stuff on the Silk Road. So that was kind of like my sort of interpretation of what Bitcoin was. But sort of in 2020, I sort of started to realize, like, okay, this white paper from Satoshi makes a lot of sense. I see a lot of application, see a lot of value here. It felt like the first time I sort of discovered the internet when I was a kid. So sorry, that was kind of like a huge, that was a really big introduction right there on my startup. But, again, I'm really passionate about this. I'm a pharmacist by trade, so I've been in the healthcare industry for quite some time.
Yeah, no, that was lovely. Thank you. You just, I don't have to, just keep going, right? So we meet on Twitter, and I remember I looked at your profile, and it says "not a farmer bro," which just totally resonated with me because of the show I have, Not Crypto Bros, which is like, obviously, when you say you're not, it's sarcastic, right? We are crypto bros, but we didn't want people to look at us and say we're crypto bros. So for you, a farmer bro, and on your Twitter it says pharmacist turned entrepreneur. So you were a pharmacist for a long time, and you kept getting these fat rebate checks, and you're like, there's got to be a better way. And then the problem is, as you're saying, that there's going to be a bunch of people in the middle who are working class who cannot afford the prescription drugs. This is also maybe sounds strange if you're not in the US context, and we have many listeners that are outside of the US context. So if you're outside of the US context, the US healthcare system is a dumpster fire, and people can constantly not pay for the services they need, whether it's medications or just going to see a medical professional for whatever problem they have. So when I see solutions like this, I absolutely love it, because the story in my head is, it's like, if you're a 30-year-old and you need to be buying a prescription drug, and you start saving sats or satoshis or little amounts of Bitcoin every month, and you outline this on the website at NIHOWDY.com, and we'll shout out all the stuff at the end. An idea is like, if I'm buying a monthly prescription from the age of 30 to 40, I'm going to be passively saving all of these sats that, as long as Bitcoin continues to do what you and I and many other people in the industry, and people who aren't in the industry, even people like Larry Fink from BlackRock, it will continue to appreciate to a point where, like you're saying, maybe that 30 cents turns into $30 in 20 years or something, which is really quite cool, because then you're solving, as you said, the out of cost prescription drug issue, which is a massive issue. Once again, if you're not in the United States, you may be like, this doesn't make sense, right? So, okay, pharmacist turned entrepreneur. When was the moment when you said, I'm going all in? And was it anything for you personally? Like, did you go to get a drug, or was your family, a friend, going to get a drug, and they just got, like, in the rigmarole of buying prescription drugs in the United States?
Wow, that's a pretty loaded question. So
Pretty loaded.
So, like, just a little context, I've used to own a lot of different pharmacies, assisted living facilities, and skilled nursing facilities all across California. When 2020 hit, I just got burnt out as a provider, but my pharmacies actually got looted during the George Floyd protest. And I just woke up one day saying, like, I can't do this anymore. Like, I'm doing really well in healthcare, but this is not what I want to do for the rest of my life. I just had severe burnout. And I took about 2.5 years to sort of, like, travel, see the world, and sort of open up my eyes. And I always had this gravitation towards Bitcoin. I just knew what it was, but I didn't understand the value proposition. Sort of that time where, after I sold everything off, I was like, all right, Bitcoin's really cool, but how do I keep applying this to healthcare? So I, talked to a group of my colleagues from pharmacy school that we always keep in touch with, and sort of just like, we're shooting this shit, and just came up with this idea of, like, well, why don't we just give drug rebates to people, that pay for medications out of pocket? And I think I just said Bitcoin, it'll be a great solution. And, my friends laughed at me because we thought it was just, it's just a joke, but it actually started becoming a reality. It was like, all right, let's try to put this together. So for almost about like 2.5 years, we would, negotiate with all these different pharmacies, these vendors. And I can tell you the first meeting that we took, the board of directors just told me like, this is the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life. It was really defeating. But a week later, the CEO called me and was like, hey, I want to talk to you about this project again. My son was actually talking about Bitcoin. So I just wanted to learn a little bit more. So it took a lot of education. It was a very long, roadmap to sort of convince a lot of people like, hey, this is an idea worth betting on here. So fast forward, until now, we've launched NIHOWDY, which is a pretty cool product. And, we're just getting started with marketing. And it's really cool that, you reached out to us on Twitter and just saw, just my Twitter post about, NIHOWDY. So
Yeah, I saw the post and I was like, oh man, I really want to dive deeper on this because I think Bitcoin is only going to continue to just take up more and more of media, not just social media, but like mainstream media is going to start trying to figure out, okay, what is this Bitcoin thing? They're going to start calling people back, just like that COO did, who talked to his son, and his son maybe came at it from a different angle, and he just knows his son a little bit more, obviously, and he trusts his son a little bit more, so he's able to kind of like put down maybe some of his COO hat and look at it from like a different angle. And I think that and healthcare are only going to continue to become bigger and bigger in the United States. I mean, in the United States right now, we have a presidential candidate who came out a day ago and said, look, if I'm president, I'm going to back the dollar with Bitcoin. Like that happened. And if you didn't know it happened, I'm telling you it happened, and you can go Google. I'm not making it up. This isn't a conspiracy. Even though if I told 99% of my friends, they're going to think that's a conspiracy. They're like, oh no, that's crazy. So I want to go actually back to something you said about the microtransactions, because this is one of the things that I'm most fascinated about by Bitcoin is the microtransactions. The fact that every Bitcoin can be broken down into 100 million little pieces, and we can use those pieces to pay. This is extremely important, especially in a country like El Salvador that now has it as its tender, because if I go buy a water and some tomatoes at the local store, I can't have a transaction fee. Now we're talking about the Lightning Network, and that's what I kind of want to ask you. But I can't have a transaction fee that is going to be 25 cents if I'm buying 30 cents of stuff, as you've said. And so in the back of NIHOWDY, if you could share, are you using Lightning?
yeah, no, we'd have to essentially use a Lightning network layer to batch and remit all these different transactions for this, for this business to work at the end of the day. But yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to see what happens, with like 1,000 Satoshis. What can that afford you later, 20 years later on in the future?
Yeah. And so, okay, going back, you said that you first heard about Bitcoin in 2008, 2009, right? And you were like, I don't know. When did you really dive in? Was that in 2020, or had you been investing a little bit before? When did you get in?
2020 was like when I said I'm going all in on this. I did a comparison with like different businesses, real estate, stock holdings, and it just said like Bitcoin just makes the most amount of sense. Has the best property rights out there. There isn't really any third party, custodian that can take advantage of you. There's no counterparty risk. That doesn't have leaky energy. If you look at like assets like businesses, you might get sued from your employees, or you might have product liability. Real estate, you have to continuously do repairs, maintenance, capital expenditures. There's all this leaky energy that sort of comes out. But with Bitcoin, if you were to purchase, a digital asset, it just stays there on the blockchain for, forever, essentially. And it doesn't leak energy. One Bitcoin will always be one Bitcoin. There isn't really any inflation or sort of like anything that sort of erodes that number. So that's sort of like, was kind of my justification and my background in my mind. I was like, all right, well, Bitcoin is definitely the next best thing, but it's very volatile, to credit a lot of different people who point this out. But I think with any new emerging technology, you're going to see a lot of ups and downs, and it's going to be pretty crazy. But the application of what Bitcoin solves and how it has a huge value proposition for just the financial markets, I think it's quite exciting to see what the future is going to hold for Bitcoin.
Yeah, I completely agree. One of the things that I wanted to ask you about the growth of NIHOWDY, due to the fact, as I've said, and I will stand by, that the U.S. healthcare system is a dumpster fire. If people don't like that, DM me. But when you think about expansion, are there other countries, and I just don't know about other countries' healthcare. I'm pretty much aware of Colombia's, where I am currently, and the US's, because that's where I grew up, and that's the hurdles I've had to deal with. When you guys think about expansion, are there other countries where this type of rebate would apply? Or are you thinking, once we cover the United States as far as growth and people know about it, we're going to use this similar setup and we're going to rinse, wash, and repeat in a different sector in another country, or even in the US in another sector, if that makes sense? I want to understand, like, what the growth looks like for you guys long term.
I would tell you in America, this is a really huge problem compared to other countries. The reason I say that is because there's a lot of different intermediaries in America, or what we call middlemen. Specifically in the pharmaceutical industry, we have benefit managers who control the flow of funds, and they'll typically do a lot of different projects or different value props for their clients, like the federal government, Medicare or Medicaid. And because there's so much administration costs, a lot of those flow dollars ends up being paid to these beneficiaries or into these intermediaries. So you'll see a lot of like waste and abuse in healthcare, unfortunately. But you're not going to see this with other nations that maybe that they don't have healthcare out there. It's all just paid out of pocket. We've looked at applying this model to other countries, and we do have a pretty good, solid understanding that this could be applied to maybe other first world countries. Probably not like I would say second or third world, since they don't have healthcare as developed. The federal or state government isn't really paying for it. But in America, this is probably one of the biggest issues that's out there. So probably I would say the largest competitor we have is actually GoodRx. What they do is they'll make anywhere from 12 to 15% of the gross merchandise value of the customer. That's a lot of money that they make just based on, how much the total prescription cost is. So, I just found that to be kind of ridiculous. There's, a publicly traded company that makes a lot of money just based off an out-of-pocket customer cost. Previous year, I was looking at their 10K, and I think they cleared about, 800 million in gross revenue. So, that's a lot of money to be made on customers who need to pay for medications. And I don't think that's really something to celebrate. But, sort of what we're doing is taking that, a similar model and just saying, hey, look, there's a way to reduce that amount for everyday customers and also to reward them with Bitcoin at the end.
I was going to ask you about GoodRx, so I'm really glad that you brought them up. Years ago, I was in a pharmacy and I was having to buy something out of pocket, and I was with someone and they were like, hey, have you used GoodRx? I was like, what is that? Download the app. I saved like 50% just by doing that. And does GoodRx, because this is one of the things I constantly think about as an entrepreneur and someone who's thinking entrepreneurially and talking to other people like you, how easy is it for them to just say, oh, this is a great idea, James? They try to buy you out, you say no, and then they're just like, all right, we're going to put this in. Is that something that like keeps you up at night? Just because GoodRx has so much of the current market share in exactly what you're doing?
So again, this is a pretty loaded question. I'll have to talk about why this industry even exists in the first place. But to your credit for this question, GoodRx is out there because of something called the most favored nation clause. So essentially, pharmacies are not able to charge pricing, or they're not able to charge customers who pay out of pocket at a discounted price. So if a pharmacy participates in what I would say like a Medicaid or Medicare program, which is like pretty much like 99% of all pharmacies in America, there's a most favored nation clause, and they're not allowed to bill a customer less than what they bill the insurance or the state or federal government. This happened, I want to say, in the 90s. There was like Target, Walgreens, Walmart, where they would have like $3, $4 generics. What ended up happening is CMS, Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services, which oversee both Medicare and Medicaid, they pretty much said, hey, we've noticed that you guys are billing other customers at a lower price, but you're billing us, at a higher price. This ultimately led to what we call an overpayment in the industry. And an overpayment is where the payer will claw back funds from the provider or the pharmacy. So sort of to create this loophole, prescription saving cards were sort of created. And at that time, GoodRx just happened to be there at the right place at the right time. A lot of different benefit managers sort of signed contracts with GoodRx, not really understanding or knowing how, it really worked. They just thought it was, just another way for them to bring in revenue to the transaction network. They've, to the credit, GoodRx does save customers money out of pocket, but it takes away a lot of the proceeds or funds from the pharmacies that have to fill medications. They almost act like an affiliate, and they, earn about 12 to what I said, like 15% of the gross merchandise value there. We're running, agreements that are very similar to what GoodRx is doing, but instead of collecting all the rebates on the back end, we're passing it forward to the customer in the front end. And sort of, I think you sort of asked me a question like, well, what happens if GoodRx decides to just sort of like take your model? And the insight I can actually give you as I was starting to develop this startup, NIHOWDY, is that a lot of publicly traded companies do not want to touch crypto. They do not want to touch NFTs, and they do not want to touch Bitcoin. It's way too volatile. When I had to talk to some of these different pharmacies and, the CEO, a story I sort of mentioned, the reaction is like, please get out. Like, this is a complete waste of our time. But I would later have a chat with him on the side, aside from the board meeting, and they would say like, look, I mean, the idea is pretty cool, but the problem is I'm going to get fired from my job because if Bitcoin goes to zero, our customers aren't going to be happy. They're going to be mad at us. Our board of directors, our shareholders, they're going to want to vote us out. it's too risky for us to make this bet or to make this gamble. A lot of publicly traded companies will realize, hey, there's some sort of potential with NFTs, but they just don't know how to circumvent or get around, navigate these, what I would call volatile waters. So it's very difficult for them to say, hey, look, let me adopt Bitcoin and just give it back as a rebate or a reward. It's very difficult for them to want to do that. And again, that's sort of why I created the startup. I believe there's some sort of, there's a risk reward benefit here. I think we can help out a lot of customers, but at the same time, I think we can create something pretty cool, for customers at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect answer. And the reason why I asked that is I was curious just to see where you were thinking about that, because I think sometimes entrepreneurs come in and they think they have some special sauce or some moat. And it's like, no. Airbnb can just like add that on and then your whole entire thing's tanked. And it will take them, I don't know, a weekend and like 5 coders to do that. Or they could even just say it's on the way, right? And I think now we're getting into patents and IP and some more technical stuff or legal, the legality of trying to moat your unique value add. So I couldn't agree more that I don't think that GoodRx is going to do it. Strictly just because I think if they do it, they're going to all of a sudden cut down their profits. They're going to be screwed. And the other thing is it's going to become really transparent what's actually going on. And I think that this is something that people like yourself and anyone who's kind of in Web3 is really into, is transparency. I don't mind actually paying, for example, $12 to mint a $20 NFT, because I'm highly aware that I'm paying the network. I'm paying basically the network security fee instead of having to pay the bank or paying somebody else or any other intermediary. I'm paying a decentralized network of people that are working on my behalf that I'm just hiring for this moment so I can acquire something. So I have actually no problem with that. But the older guard, the Web 2, the Web 1, the Web 0, the whoever, the board members are sitting there. They don't like that. They're not excited about that. And with that said, moving forward, how big do you think NIHOWDY is going to get? And what is going to allow it to get that big? Like, is there going to be a moment? And I'll give you the example. Many people in Bitcoin are like, maybe if BlackRock ETF drops, it's going to blow up. So what's like the BlackRock ETF as far as the NIHOWDY mass adoption roadmap? Like, is there going to be something where you have a huge cosign and there's an ad and you're like with the CEO of Walgreens and you guys are like, hey, use NIHOWDY, get paid in Bitcoin?
I don't know when that event's going to be. I just think it's pretty crazy. Look, the medications, are in our portfolio. They're really competitively priced. We're usually about the same price as GoodRx, or probably even cheaper. The cool cherry on the top is customers are getting Bitcoin for free. When will this company take off? Hopefully the bull run. I hope people will start to realize there's some potential here with Bitcoin, and realize, hey, I'm already buying medications. Like, why don't I just earn Bitcoin on those purchases? So I think, that we'll see, I guess, when the Bitcoin bull run will actually happen. I think that'll be a huge determining factor. But sort of what I think is pretty cool is like, it's a necessity business. Like, people are always going to need medications. They're going to need prescriptions. They're just not going to like not take it. I mean, it's quality of life sort of ordeal. What I'm actually wanted to share with you on your podcast, like the second product we're actually working on, it's actually going to be called NIHOWDY. So for the play on words, but as you can imagine, it's going to be drug rebates for pet prescriptions. So that'll be something we'll be working on pretty quickly, and it'll be coming out shortly after. There's a lot of cool products we have in our pipeline, but I think just being able to give a product to everyday people who need a necessity item and to give them Bitcoin for free will onboard a lot of different people who are probably perhaps Bitcoin naive or just don't know too much about Bitcoin, and they don't have to invest in it. It's a perfect way for them to sort of get involved and see how it performs.
Yeah, I love that. And NIHOWDY, that's ridiculous. And I tell people all the time, if you're going to start a startup, do something around babies or pets, because people will spend, there's no budget for either of those. They're both, you're going to spend whatever it is for your pet or your baby. So I think that's really cool. And I want to actually talk about the website right now. So I'm on NIHOWDY.com and it says, it looks simple. And I want to just check in that it's that simple. It says, number 1, look up drug pricing. Number 2, show your membership card to a pharmacist. And on the website, everyone, you can literally just go download this card today. So you can start using it today if you're listening to this podcast. Number 3, it says save and earn in Bitcoin. So my question is more on the third, the save and earn in Bitcoin. What is someone who's listening to this who doesn't know anything about Bitcoin, but is really interested to start to use this because they already use GoodRx anyways, but they're like, you know what? I should get some Bitcoin exposure. And if I don't have to put my money into it, that's even better. Right? So what would someone need to do who's not Bitcoin native to be able to start saving today when they buy their drugs with NIHOWDY?
I mean, signing up on our website is super easy. I made sure you can sign up in less than like 10 seconds. It's single sign on, so you can just sign on with Google or Facebook. Essentially, you'll have a membership card. It's free of charge. We don't charge for this membership at all. And you'll receive a unique identifier. That unique identifier, you take it to your pharmacist and say, hey, look, I'm a customer of NIHOWDY. I would like to make sure I get preferred pricing or discounted pricing through NIHOWDY and also receive, these drug rebates or these rewards in Bitcoin. And these rewards or payouts, they actually happen 60 days after the transaction occurs at the pharmacy.
Okay, cool. So the wallet though, what wallet would I have if I set up my NIHOWDY? How does that work?
Yeah. So right now, our payouts are free to Coinbase.com users. So if they wanted to use Coinbase, there's no transaction fee that gets taken in the middle. Usually, if it's like a 30-cent transaction, it's difficult. You could plug in your wallet essentially, and we could pay out that way as well. You'll still have to end up doing KYC or know your customer through OnFido, and we pay for that coverage as well. So for the customer, it's just as simple as just create an account. We'll hold the Bitcoin for you. And when you're ready to withdraw it, you simply provide us either your Coinbase.com wallet or your Coinbase.com user account, or you provide us with your Lightning wallet from there.
That is so easy. And I was hoping it was that easy because the website makes it sound that easy. So that's really, really cool. We've talked about NIHOWDY. And now I want to touch upon something that we mentioned when we were off mic. And that is that we're both Utes holders. And I think, other than my friend B Chills, who's big in the D-Gods, the D-Labs community, he's got a D-Gods and he's got a Utes. You're the only other person I know that has a Ute. So when did you get in?
I was involved in this NFT project. I was just like a really active, participant, and I got nominated actually for Utes, and my application got approved. I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. I guess I'll just mint this. And I remember they gave you like it was a tubes ball or Tooms. I can't remember the name of it. And I remember minting this actually when I was on vacation. I did it in front of my friends. They're like, oh, that's actually kind of cool. You turn this little ball into like your profile picture, essentially. I love my Utes. It's this like green character with these like orange glasses. The design's pretty cool. So I'm kind of curious, actually, what kind of Utes do you have? Like,
yeah, I'll have to send to you. So the reason why I got the Utes is I was thinking about using it in licensing for the podcast. So I was waiting a long time, and I wanted to get one that have headphones very similar to the ones that you have on, the over the ear. They're black. He has glasses. I often wear sunglasses. And it just totally fit. And I have a black hoodie. It's the hoodie that's on my Twitter that says merch is not utility. And so it was a black hoodie. It had the headphones, and I was like, and it was a little brown dude. I was like, yo, I got to cop that. So I recently got into Utes, and anyways, but yeah, I got in because I was like, cool community. I actually think what Frank is doing is really great. And I think Frank is breaking the mold for people leading communities because he's just so transparent. And he's like, yeah, I messed up. Like that whole joke, like, blame Frank. Like it was probably Frank's fault. It's kind of like the, but her emails of Web3 at this point, So I'm just really excited to see what Utes and D-Gods does. And I know that was a detour away from talking about Bitcoin entrepreneurship, but I kind of wanted to call it out and make sure it was on mic. James, do you want to talk at all about NIHOWDY? Or do you want to leave that? We could leave that for another episode.
That'd have to be another episode.
Okay. All right. We'll leave that for another episode. Do you want to take the time now to kind of shout out where people can get in touch with you if they want to learn more about NIHOWDY? You can shout out your Twitter. You can shout out NIHOWDY's, all NIHOWDY socials. I think it'd be a great moment for people to basically find out where they can get in touch with you, because there's probably not a person, if you're in the US, that isn't buying prescription drugs. Now, whether they're covered by insurance is another question, but every once in a while we have to buy things that are out of coverage or out of network, as they say. So please take this time to kind of shout out all the things for NIHOWDY that are relevant.
Sure. Right now, the website's just NIHOWDY.com. Super simple, NIHOWDY.com. My Twitter is The Simple Doctor. We don't have any socials, I guess, for the company yet, since it's still pretty much in the beginning. So it's all organic, word of mouth. And you can also find me on LinkedIn. My full name is James Daniel Wong. So LinkedIn.com/James Daniel Wong. Pretty active. More than happy to talk to customers. That's kind of what I want to do. So
perfect. I'm going to throw all of those in the show notes, and I'll be sure to add you personally on LinkedIn so we can get you tagged when the episode goes live. James, this has been wonderful. And thanks so much for hopping on and talking about NIHOWDY.
Thanks, Jarrett, for having me on.
Thanks for checking out this episode of More Than Blockchain. And to get in touch with James and check out NIHOWDY, go ahead and check out this episode's show notes, where I'm going to leave a bunch of links. As always, please follow us on social media at More Than Blockchain, And if you enjoyed this episode, and especially if you're in the US and you know someone that buys prescription drugs, as many of us do in the US, please go ahead and share this episode with them. It's a great way for them to go ahead and start saving massive amounts of money on their prescriptions and also start to earn Bitcoin, which is a pretty good perk. No matter where you're listening to the pod, please go ahead and subscribe. And thanks again for checking out this episode of More Than Blockchain. I'll see you next time.